Welcome. Welcome to this month's Human Capital Watch webcast series. I'm Amy Abel. I'm the Vice President for Human Capital here at the Conference Board, and I'm very excited to have you join me for today's conversation, Coaching the Future Digital Leader. Very hot topic, and an esteemed panel joining me to explore this conversation further. What does it mean, and how should we do it? What should we think about? Lots of great questions that we will be uncovering, and in fact we will talk specifically about the specific leadership skills that we're all experiencing, seeing, and examining of what has changed given the times, not only digital, right? This 2020 year has been chaotic, to say the least. What has been going on in our world, and how has that impacted our leadership skills? And what do we need for the future? That's actually perhaps even more important. We're living in a crazy world, but what should we think about from our leaders and our leadership skills perspective? And of course, finally, how do we help them get there? Those of us that are in the leadership development space, in HR, coaching, talent management, all of us are interested in helping and supporting our leaders to be the best that they can be for the future of our organization and the world that we live in. So lots of chaos, but we really want to dig deeper and explore that, and glad that you've joined us for today. Those of you that need to, would like to earn credits, you can see there's a box on the bottom of the screen. So we do need your help in typing in the information and the pop-up windows that occur, and you will be receiving these credits. So thanks for that. All right, so before we dig into the content, let me introduce our speakers for today. You can see at least on our screen as well as on the slide, we have Jennifer Paylor joining us from IBM. She is an IBM people engineer, a Marshall Goldsmith 100 executive coach, and a patented inventor of a coaching system for guiding interactions. I did not know that one, Jennifer. Woohoo! She uses art and science to help leaders create the best work environment for their teams. She is an executive leadership and coaching leader for IBM's enterprise operations and services, responsible for developing senior leaders. And she has been featured in the New York Times bestseller, The Advice Trap by Michael Stainer. She was also awarded the Gold Stevie winner for the most valuable HR professional. Thank you so much for joining me, Jennifer. I also have with us Michael Ireland, who is Executive Director of Columbia Leadership. Michael's expansive experience includes work across all industries, from tech, energy, food services, financial services, healthcare, and others. He was National Director and Chief Learning Officer at Deloitte, where he led the building of Deloitte's U.S. into a coached organization. Prior to Deloitte, he worked at JPMorgan Chase and was integral in developing a firm-wide learning and coaching program. He is a thought leader and adjunct at Columbia University and at New York University, developing, researching, and experimenting with cutting-edge content and ways of facilitating and coaching. And finally, but not least, my colleague, Dr. Nabil Ahmed, who is a senior researcher at the Conference Board. Nabil is a learning disruptor who works at the intersection of business, technology, and learning. How cool is that? He has spent years leading strategic HR and learning initiatives in business environments focused on novel technology applications. He has worked at IBM, JPMorgan Chase, KPMG, and the United Nations, among others. And of course, he has degrees in all of these fabulous areas of learning, technologies, computer science, and business. So first, let me pause and say welcome, thank you to our esteemed panel for joining me today. So let's jump into it. For the audience, I wanted to invite you to join into this conversation today. So you can see in the lower left-hand pod, there is a share your questions or comments below. So please do ask questions as we're talking, and we want to see what you're thinking, and I will feed some of these questions into the conversation. So please do join us, and I will come back to that. All right, so the topic of conversation, coaching the future digital leader. This is a big conversation, and all of us were already on this digitization journey prior to 2020 and the pandemic and the economic crisis and the civil injustice and unrest that we're all experiencing. So there's just so much going on, it's almost overwhelming, but I wanted to start the conversation by first with some basic definitions. What we, as a panel, realized that when you say the term digital leader, it might mean lots of different things to different people, different organizations. So let me start with Nabil, and then I'll ask Jennifer, what is a digital leader? What is a digital leader, or what does a digital leader look like? What do you think, Nabil?
Sure. First, thanks off to Amy for hosting and for Michael and Jennifer for joining. Really excited to have you, and I noticed in a rare instance it looks like I'm wearing the exact same thing as my profile pic, so maybe that's a plus there. But going to our topic around digital leader, if you just search online for something like digital leader, you'll see lots of definitions, and I think part of the reason why I even wanted to start with this is to say, what could it mean for this audience? So typically when you look online, a lot of it will talk about the proliferation of technology, how technology is going to change the way that we're looking at a variety of things. And to a large extent, that's true and still true. But if we look over the past 6-8 months, or really 2020, crazy year, as we all know, that meaning in many ways has evolved. And one way that I look at it is to say, okay, well, part of the interesting part is that when you typically think of leaders, especially in person, you think corner office. You think a commanding presence. But what happens virtually and tends to happen in the digital space is we're all the same. The leader is just one video tile, same as everyone else. And so it's sort of like a sort of a humbling experience. And the question really is how is a leader being able, and how should they be able to leverage technology and leverage ways to engage and foster creativity and innovation with their employees and with their group that they lead to create a better place. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but really I would say as we start to look for more of the hard skills around data, being able to just understand and analyze data, that's an important part. And then as we look on the flip side of the coin, things more like the softer skills, just encouraging creativity, innovation, and also having a more frequent type of communication and engagement scenario. So that's it for now, but really looking forward to us getting deeper into this conversation. Thanks, Amy.
Jennifer?
Yes, that's awesome, Nabil. I love that. And I would say that thinking about a digital leader, I try to think about it as it's a way that people lead, of course, the way they learn, the way they think, and the way they live. So when I think about the construct of a digital leader, I keep going back to Leonardo da Vinci, or the Renaissance woman, or the Renaissance man. A digital leader has to be able to do many things and also rethink a lot of things. So one of the things that I think is very important for a digital leader, just the concept, if you want to write down it for yourself, Nabil mentioned it, a lot of things are changing, but one thing I would keep in mind is keeping up. What does it take for you as a leader to keep up? And all of those things that it's going to take for you to keep up, I'm not going to say you will achieve that, but those are the things that we'll talk about in this session. How do you keep up? And I was thinking about earlier, you remember this thing called a newspaper? How does a leader get the news now? Online, newspaper. So it's a lot of things that digital leaders have to do to keep up. And I just equated to a Renaissance woman or a Renaissance man.
Great. Thanks for that. Just to establish baseline, right? And we all know that it means many things to many people. And the technology itself is causing such dramatic change that digitization, it's actually almost impossible to define in some instances. But we will try. We will continue that. Let's move into, before we jump into more thoughts on digitization, we can't ignore the fact that 2020 and the year that we're living in is just in our every presence, every cell of what we do in our lives. So I wanted to ask, how has COVID and the pandemic impacted the views and approaches of our leaders and leadership development, within organizations and with other organizations that you work with? Because I know several of you work with different organizations as well as within a big, or smaller or larger organizations. What has been the change? What's been going on around leaders and leadership development because of COVID and this world? Maybe let me start with you, Jennifer, on that one.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that is a very important, that's right here at the front of our minds. One of the things that I saw that just instantly came out was the idea of humanity. Now, it's almost embarrassing to say that, but this COVID-19, the climate, it really put a spotlight on what does it mean to be human. Sometimes when we lead and go to work, I'm not saying we're not aware of it, but what does it really mean? And I think leaders, one of the things I did was help leaders really tune in on what that really means in practice. Because sometimes we take for granted that we are being human and we are humans at work. So how do we really bring that humanity back to work? And in COVID-19, what does it mean to check in? Check-in is not just a word. It's not just a check the box. So how we check in, how deep we go, and everybody is different. So we can't take a paintbrush and just color everyone with a broad stroke. So now some of the top players that were top players pre-COVID, pre all of the insecurities and instability that's been going on around the world, they're not your top performers anymore. They're dealing with other things that are emotionally exhausting. Burnout is real. It was real before, but it is really coming to the forefront right now. So leaders are having to really think about self-compassion, take care of yourself. How do you take care of others? How do you really make connections and build those social bonds? And many of you as coaches and leaders have heard of the past studies around connections and ties. One of the things in COVID-19 that we saw, employee engagement is up. It's up actually from last year. Trust is up. But the thing that's down are those weaker ties, that social bonding. So we're having to get leaders to think about what that looks like in practice.
Yeah, and that's got to be so hard, right? We're talking about digital world and digitization, and your point is so, relevant of we need to be more human, actually. How about you, Michael? Let me, the organizations that you work with, what are you seeing and hearing and digging deeper into?
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, and thanks everybody for these great perspectives. I think we in the beginning we were seeing two things, and they're a bit of a dichotomy. One was a reactivity and a move toward, let's say, our least best state as leaders. So leaders full of anxiety, overworked, to Jennifer's point, burned out, trying to use in-office skills digitally. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that still with people calling Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, not putting boundaries around work, those type of things. Some of those things were already present before COVID, and they're exacerbated by the digital space. On the flip side, there's been an openness to accelerate adoption of digital tools, devices, and mindsets to be able to deal with this new reality. So, we've had some really recalcitrant leaders who didn't want to deal with technology really at all before COVID are now saying, well, I have to do it. And not only do I have to do it, I want to do it because I see that as a solution, to the point that a lot of people are even overusing technology. And then what we have in the middle is, to Jennifer's point, which is humanity. You know, what's tying it together, what's allowing us to really move forward out of this with the leaders that we're working with, is getting in touch with who you are, whether that's around things as deep as your racial identity, who you are as a leader in a digital space, your emotional state, your energy, those topics that we really didn't touch on in the same way before COVID, getting real with ourselves as leaders to then move forward and think again and be emotive again and be human again as leaders. And that I think is really contributing to that higher level of engagement, because leaders are being seen as not just cogs in the machine or captains of the ships. They're being seen as people, and they're kind of forced to be seen as people and see themselves as people. And I think that's having huge rewards, both in terms of organizational success and also personal success and satisfaction. Now, a lot of leaders still have a long way to go with that. We all do. That's a journey. But those are some of the things that we're seeing.
Yeah, no, really good point. Good point. Thank you. I wondered for the audience whether you are experiencing the same sorts of feelings and thoughts, processes, and thinking with the leaders that you are working with, or even yourself as a leader. So feel free to type in some questions, and we'll continue our conversation, and I'll bring that voice of yours into this conversation. Let me move on to the next question. So we know that COVID is just something that will be with us for a while, but the journey of digitization was before COVID and will, of course, be after COVID. And I'm seeing things around the acceleration of digitization, right, because of COVID, all of these great things. Let's dig a little bit into specific leadership skills. And maybe, Nabil, I'll start with you, where let's talk specifically about different skills that you are all seeing with yourselves and the leaders that you're working with. You know, what has changed in terms of skills, or what are likely to change, and what has actually stayed the same? And I know that's a long question, but I'm happy to jump back in as appropriate. But what do you think, Nabil?
Sure, thank you. And you know, I'd say first thing, and I mentioned this a bit in my initial response on the digital leader, is this idea of presence and engagement. So maybe just to double down on that, is that typically sort of leaders, you know, they would sort of work behind closed doors, and not all of them, of course, but they would work through and kind of use the power of their teams to kind of proliferate and sort of disseminate their strategy and their thoughts. And what's happened in the past 7 or so months, or really this year, is there's been an increasing desire and almost a demand from employee populations where they're saying, you know what, we need to see you because we're out here in the trenches. I mean, you could see me, like, I mean, I got my kids sort of school set up back here. I'm in the basement. Many of us are like that. Even if we don't have kids, then some of us are even needing to overcome, right, and helping others out. So we're all stretched in different ways, more than one. And so there's an increasing desire for the employee population to say, we need to see our leaders, and just hearing a pre-recorded webcast once a quarter isn't good enough. What are you doing to help us out? And I think that's sort of the great leveling of the playing field there. And so what does presence mean, and what does engagement mean? So I think that is really one of the biggest things that I have seen, and I know a lot of research to the conference board and conversations through, you know, various members has also shown that that the employees are actually feeling that engagement and presence of leaders has gone up, which is good. But at the same time, then it's, well, we also have to ask the question on, are we asking people too much? Or you're asking, people are essentially getting fatigued by being asked, what do you think, all the time? And so, of course, there's an important balance to be made there. So I feel like that's one of the big areas that is changing. And what I think will remain the same, but it's maybe more of a spotlight now, is the focus on creativity and innovation and having like a growth mindset. And, you know, these are all things that if you ask any leader, more or less nobody will say that they're not important, but have they really been pushing that forward? And oftentimes organizations and leaders, they'll do things when they feel like they need to. And then that's been the interesting sort of, I would say, side effect that's happened this year, is that many of us have all been pushed in that direction at the same time. So those types of skills are becoming more interesting and more valuable to an organization, because leaders who can foster cultures and environments of experimentation, creativity, inclusion, not only is it a good thing to say, but they're actually seeing business results. And so I think that is really one of the big changes that's happened over the past several months.
No, absolutely. How about you, Michael? And to add on to that, or some of the same thoughts around the skills that have changed or will remain the same?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of focus on 4 different areas. So the first is obviously digital presence. How are you showing up? Where are you showing up? Are you using the right platforms? Do you know how to use the platforms? Do you pick up the phone to someone and have a real conversation with them even? So that back to that point of, are we using platforms in the right way? And then how, as a leader, am I coming across on the platform? The second piece is around decision making. So how are we making decisions? Often leaders pre-COVID were making a lot of decisions on their own or with input, but very much command and control, although we all try to move away from that. We know that's not best practice in most settings. What we're seeing now is a much more distributive decision-making model, which is wonderful, but that's also causing a lot of death by Zoom meeting, because we got to get everybody together for every decision to get inputs, because we can't see, touch, or feel what's happening in our markets, in our spaces, with our charges as much. Obviously, people focus will continue to be huge, and that's, as a leader, how are you visible without being intrusive, and you're supporting people in their lives, and once again, you're being human with them. And I think tying it all together is the fourth, which is balancing strategy and tactics. So in the beginning of COVID, there's a lot of focus on tactics. How do we keep going? And then there's a lot of focus that shifted to strategy, workforce planning. What do we do with the business, with the organization? Now we're back to a state where, once again, leaders need to balance both. They need to balance the today work and the tomorrow work, and they need to be comfortable in that uncomfortable space, and they need to really, once again, think through things with input, obviously.
Yeah, I know, lots of great points, because they continue to resonate for leaders that were always great skills, but perhaps taking a new urgency with today's environment. Jennifer, what are you seeing?
I'll say what we've been really beefing up is the data visualization and storytelling. That storytelling skill is very important for leaders to connect the dots and actually be able to take that data, all of the data that they're getting, make some insights, and connect it to action. And doing that really well using that business storytelling capability. We've also focused a lot on inspirational leadership. So in order to be a good and effective inspirational leader, most people think it requires charisma. And they'll say, I don't have charisma, maybe I'm not that outgoing, or that I'm not that energized, but it does take energy. So one of the things with everything that's going on now and change being so fast, leaders have to really prioritize sleeping. Like, I say that and people laugh, but you have to get enough sleep. You have to get at least 6 hours. And you would be surprised how many leaders do not. I coach a lot of leaders, and some leaders sleep every other day. That type of thing. So think about, we have leaders think about, what does it take to be inspirational, getting that self-care and that sleep. 2 other things that we've been looking at it's around the agility space, but possibility thinking and sense making. So when we have that possibility thinking, we are looking at what's possible. If we don't have possibility thinking, we're focusing on, what's certain right now, what do we have right now? And sometimes you can get disrupted or get stuck when change comes around the corner, the virus, different things in the business, trying to, like Michael said, rethink your business model or capabilities that you need now because of the digitization. But what's possible is how we reorient our mindset. And it's so hard to do sometimes because we can only deal with what's happening right now. So trying to stretch the mindset and the muscle to get leaders to really reorient their thinking in this digital space. Because if you haven't tuned in and trained that possibility thinking, it's very hard to make sense of this digital transformation that these digital leaders are leading. So there's a big difference between the digital transformation versus the digital leader in that transformation. And a lot of that possibility thinking, sense making, inspirational leadership, and storytelling is pretty key for us.
Good one. Nabil, more thoughts?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts and thanks for those there. There's a couple of things, Jennifer and Michael, that you had mentioned around. One was around this idea of sort of using data and then kind of the storytelling side. So I've done one I think maybe a somewhat interesting one is that back to the question on what may change soon is I think it's because now a lot of what we're happening is digital when it may have previously been in person. So now we have more ability to measure it. But it's not just the ability to measure, but it's understanding the why behind it. So here's a good example, and so I'll try to tell a story here. This happened yesterday and this morning, literally an hour ago before I got on this call. So you can see I got my kid's makeshift desk back here. So my son, he's in second grade, so he's about 6, so almost turned 7, and he had a math test yesterday, and then he's doing it on the computer, and I'm like, okay, let me give you some space and let's let you do it because I don't want to help him. I want to see like what's happening. And let's just say like the results were less than pleasing. So I'm like, oh man, what do we do? So, like, where am I going wrong as a parent? All right, I'm sort of in that phase now. And so then because I had the ability to then, and it was done online, I go and look back at it. So and I say, okay, well, let me understand why he got the score that he got. And it turns out because that he wouldn't have gotten 100 anyway. So let's put that out there first. But what happened is that the way that the interface was set up is that, again, these are 6-year-olds, is that he needed to scroll down for like a 2-part answer. So he gets, half the answers right or so, but it's counted wrong because he didn't scroll down and click the second part of the answer. And so my wife actually had a conversation with the teacher today to sort of bring this up to say, do you know if other people are in this boat? So the reason why I mention this is that if we just look at the data to help us make decisions, then we may, without asking ourselves the why behind it, then we may be missing an important piece that could help us to actually get to the root of the problem. And so what ended up happening as a result of this conversation was to say, okay, they're going to go back to their team and kind of see where people are. So I feel like one part on understanding the data, but also understanding the why behind it, but also being able to try to tell some more of the humanized type stories. And so that was one piece. The other quick point that I wanted to mention, I was just looking through the chat. A lot of times, people are talking about being able to see the human side, right? I think that's a continual thing that has come up and will come up for the next, the remainder of this discussion, is being able to see that people sort of have a life outside of their work. And where I think the important part is the ability for leaders to understand that and empathize with their workers and essentially walk a mile in their shoes. So, typically these days there's people who have like kids in school and then lots of people who don't. But for the people who don't, because oftentimes, typically, like we're always talking about, oh, you've got your kids, it must be so hard. But we also need to empathize with the people who, because of maybe they have more free time, they're actually taking on potentially more of a burden. So different people in the organization regarding their personal experiences and situations, we still have to empathize what they're going through and come up with perhaps different or similar ways to help to support them in these initiatives. So thank you.
Yeah, no, really great points. I mean, all of you suggested terrific things: presence, creativity, growth mindset, right? Decision making in a distributed, balancing, strategy, tactics, storytelling, sleeping, my favorite, sleeping, right? Sense making. All of these are critical. And I was also going to add to the empathy conversation. I have been talking to a lot of companies. They all want to talk about empathy in leadership. Empathy in leadership. Very popular topic. And that was also brought up by some of our audience members. So thank you, Ryan, for noting that you actually feel empathy is the most strongest element that perhaps we need to focus our leaders on. Okay, so here's the thing. We just have a laundry list of these incredible leadership skills, right? And they're really hard. When you talk about, all these topics, they're very difficult. And let me turn to Michael. So all of these skills are changing, they're evolving. How do we help our leaders to strengthen these muscles? These are difficult times and difficult skills. How do we help them? What are you seeing? How do we think about this in a digital and non-digital way?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to go back to the empathy. As coaches, as developers of leaders, supporters of leaders, in some cases leaders ourselves, what is their reality? What are they going through, right? So go in with curiosity and not go in with judgment when a CEO has canceled his session 3 times in a row, right? Like there's a lot going on that caused that. Let's be curious about it. So that's just coaching 101. We found a lot of success, and we moved to this model in our arsenal last year, where with certain coaches who have the skills, we're doing a model that's, we call it CTC, coach, teacher, counselor. So the coach plays 3 roles interchangeably. Now, not every coach can do this. You typically need some kind of mental health background, some ability and experience facilitating, and obviously the coaching credentials and experience. But it really behooved us to move that way, because of what we were seeing even before COVID with the move to digitalization, where time is at a premium, on demand is in every part of our lives, whether it's on TV, on our phones, where we're getting that news these days. Everything's on demand, and this is what our clients wanted. They wanted more in less time. Now, when COVID happened, it obviously has accelerated a lot of digitization and accelerated our interactions with our client leaders, where we'll go in and be a coach one day, and maybe the next session we're bringing in a mini learning module and we're being a teacher, and maybe the next session we're dealing with burnout from the leader or high anxiety. Sometimes that's all in one session. So that's a model that we're moving toward that is really helping the leader, to Jennifer's earlier point, keep up. How do we help the leader keep up, head above water, and even give them the space to change their mindset, the space to be able to focus forward, to be more strategic, and to bring out the term of anti-fragility, which is beyond resilience. So we're also doing a lot of work and a lot of research in that space. How do we actually, and I saw one of the comments here, questions, how do we actually thrive in all of this chaos, stress, and pressure? And we can, but it's something that needs to be learned, and it's a mindset shift, and it's something that needs to be supported, and that's the work we're doing.
Yeah. So I think I want to come back to that, Michael, but let me also turn to Jennifer for a second. How are you going about coaching, again, supporting leaders in these very difficult transitional skills and in a difficult time? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so 3 things. One is getting leaders to think about what their superpowers are. So sometimes we take for granted things that we just do well, and we just say, hey, we got it, and we just bring it into play. But now it's important to intentionally bring it into play, so that way leaders can't. So for example, if you are a closer, if you just naturally close, you do a great job closing, how do we amplify that? Because it helps build the confidence. And sometimes when you are struggling, or when you need to accomplish things in small chunks, lean into that superpower or your strengths. So we're helping leaders really amplify that. Remember, you're good at this, so how can you play to this more? The other thing that I think has been very helpful for me with coaching leaders is really being good at that organizational development, organizational effectiveness. So we know the history around coaching, it kind of goes between OD, coaching, psychology, and those things, but helping that leader see the organization in a very different way, because it's a lot of culture now involved with this change, and what do you want your culture to look like? So I'm helping leaders with OD, a lot more now than I was probably 5 years ago. So I think it's really good to, as a coach, to get your chops up in OD. And then the last thing I would say from a coaching perspective with leaders is, really having them to, like, and I'm saying this on purpose because you have to get to that thinking space, to stop and think. Like I'm having my leaders say, I need you to schedule time on your calendars to think. Do nothing else. I don't want them to, look at the phone. I don't want them to just say, I put it on my calendar, but if I see something urgent, but really practicing good thinking, nothing else around. So that's been something I've been trying to just hone in on, because I think that, I'm not saying we lost the ability, but I think that with everything going on, there's so much research and science around, the well-being, the cognitive processing load, that type of thing. How are we offloading, doing cognitive offloading before we go to a meeting? So leaders don't have the space to think. It's simple, and a lot of the stuff that I do, I'm not a rocket scientist at all. It's probably be pretty cool if I did it, but I'm not. But I just try to figure out how can they master those basics. Get back to what you're good at, build that confidence up, and then just think, nothing else. And I think if leaders can do that, they can think. James Baldwin, a great author, poet. I've been studying him a lot along with Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the things that James Baldwin used to say is the cat has to know the bag he's in. So if you don't know the bag you're in, if you're not thinking about what's happening to you, you're going to stay stuck in the bag. So that's my advice to leaders that I'm trying to coach.
So let me dig into that, Jennifer. So I love the strength-based focus, and we see a lot of development conversations going on in many organizations that are focusing on strength-based, and that's great for all the reasons you articulated. Getting them to think, that sounded really tough when I heard you talking about it. Of course, it makes perfect sense, but so are you giving them like a homework assignment? Like you need to spend this hour thinking about this topic, or how are you helping them with that? I'm just kind of interested in the actual tactics of that.
Yeah, so I'll share what I do, and it's not, like I said, a cookie cutter, but for the most part, I introduce the concept, and I say, let me look at your calendar. And I'll look at the calendar, and I'll say, there's no time for you to think. So I will work with them on their calendar, and for the first week, like first 3 weeks, I'll say, let's put 2 15-minute blocks on your calendar, 15 minutes, because I know it's going to be super hard. And they'll say, I can do it every day. I can put 3. I said, no, I don't want you to get demotivated. Just try 2. So they'll come back the next week or next 2 weeks and say, you were right. It was really difficult. And then we'll talk about it in coaching, what made it difficult and those type of things. And then we will adjust, so now they are aware and that type of thing. So then I introduce, once they start to be aware and say, I just need to do like 10 minutes, they get real, like, some leaders are just competitive once they get aware, competitive with themselves. So then I introduce them with a time box or something. This is called the Pomodoro. So I will introduce one. It has a little beeper on it, so you can hear it beep. And I'll say, just set it for 5 minutes, and I don't want you to do anything. And they will ask me, Amy, should I think about something? I need to be doing something. And I'm saying, that's the problem. You need to be doing something. I want you to be being. I want you to be being. And I need for your brain waves to get down to a theta level. You can't measure it, but if you just sit there. And so then I have them do the time box with a beeper. Some of them are digital. So they work on that for about a month or 2. After a while, we'll start getting feedback from them and their teams about how thoughtful they are. And so that's how we kind of do it, introducing it, start working on the practicing, what's getting in the way, and figuring out different tools where they can actually monitor their thinking. And then they notice when they're not thinking, well, what happened that week? Like it's the end of the quarter, and they were like, everything blew up. We had to close the quarter, so I know I need to be more mindful during that time.
That's great. Terrific. Great story. And it's actually, I was actually laughing when you said we have to work on thinking for 5 minutes and they spend a month or two doing this. It sounds so simple, but we're spending months to think for 5 minutes. It was just slightly ironic to me, but this is the world in which we live. How about Nabil, and then I'll come to Michael, perhaps another tip like that.
Sure, sure. And just to follow up on that, I think it's what I'm hearing is really the ability for leaders to not only give themselves, but those who are leading permission to disengage or to unplug. And so one of the things, maybe a practical tip that I've done, when I led large teams, is I would institute something called dark hours or quiet hours. And it would be 2 hours once a week, and it's on everybody's calendar. So it's a calendar invite. So because oftentimes leaders especially live by their calendar. So if it's not on their calendar, they're not going to do it. And this is following up to Jennifer's point. And one of the things that I had found is for leaders, for instance, if they're taking, let's say, 15, 20 minutes or so to be able to spend time by themselves, where the potential gap is somebody can still come in and reach out to them and sort of disrupt that. So for teams, if you take it simultaneously at the same time, everybody's working on something that they're completely disconnected on. And I even went so far as turning off the internet or going offline and email just to make sure that you have that deep concentration time. And then to Michael's point earlier on the last question was around, because we're going from meeting to meeting and you're always being on, your brain is always being wired, the importance of the ability to just have that transition time to disconnect and to recollect your thoughts is more important, honestly, now than ever, because we're seeing it as being more scarce. So that's one of the things that I found, is that sort of the idea is giving yourself permission and giving your team permission, leading by example, but then also kind of putting it on your calendar and making sure that it gets done.
Yeah, great, great. Last thought from Michael on this one?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One is, and Jennifer got to this, is giving them the ability to coach themselves, right? So building that capability within themselves to actually see, think, and do something about it. And taking it a little further, we like to run experiments. So in essence, that's what you guys are doing too, right? Let's try 15 minutes twice, that type of thing. And we'll say, well, how about for this next week with your team, you put in some boundaries around start time and end time for people, including yourself. See how it works. And then let's come back together and see what we should change, what we should modify. The other challenge we typically give leaders is try cutting your meetings down by, let's say, 20% this week. So Microsoft did this forcibly last August. It seems like eons ago, but they did this in Japan, which is a culture that arguably is even a little wilder with their overworking than we are here in the States. And they got rid of Fridays. It wasn't just work from home on Fridays. It was, we're not working at all on Fridays in August, as an experiment. And you know what happened? Their productivity and their sales actually went up by 20% in August, right? So we're also seeing this with companies we work with. There's a large automobile manufacturer in Germany, and when you go away or when you turn on your out of office, emails are bounced back to you. That person will never receive the email unless you resend it when they're in the office. So what can we experiment with, and then what are the processes and systems we can put in place to safeguard and protect the time to think, the time to recharge, the time to reflect, the time to take care of ourselves. That's as important, if not more, than the doing and the reactivity, especially as a leader, obviously.
I totally points and the experimentation. Sorry, I'm a little echoey. Experimentation is awesome as a great suggestion, right? Help our leaders experiment, try different things. That's great. Before we move on to our last question, I'm just moving along in the inches of time here. Did get a bunch of top comments and great questions from the audience, so thank you for that. But one of the questions came in around leaders and their networks, right? Obviously, it's incredibly important. And now that we're in Zoom world forever and ever, it seems, how are you helping your leaders and coaching them around their networks, either building, maintaining, strengthening, any thoughts around that? I don't know, Jennifer, and then I'll come to the others.
Yeah, this is a very good question. Because we're talking about time, right? Like trying to prioritize different things and manage time and balance. So sometimes in the leaders that I coach, the networking piece is not on the priority list because they're so high up, in their career and that type of thing. And so sometimes you can get complacent around what does life look like, outside of the here and now. And so what do you have to offer? So one of the things that I try to do with each of my leaders is really get them in tune with their purpose in life and their mission. And so then I attach that to there's a need for you to broaden your network, because if that is your purpose and your mission, most of the time their network does not align with it. And so they start to realize like, wow, I've really forgotten why I even started this journey. And now that I've come so far in the journey, the network that I have built up is not compatible with my overarching mission as a leader. And we start to do some very tactical exercises looking at the different ways they can start to build their network. And I will tell you, it is so uncomfortable sometimes at first when I try to get them to have that external eminence, using those digital tools, things of that nature. It's a lot of fear there. What should I say? Should I, they're worried about how they look, how it comes across. And so I just use the phrase, let your hair down. What's the worst that can happen? And so something bad happens, you recover. You learn from it. So just getting them to let their hair down, let other people into their lives, and look at it as a way that you can learn from diverse groups of people to help you with your mission.
Yeah, no, good one. How about you, Michael? How are you helping your leaders with their networks in this crazy world we're in?
Often as leaders move up, they go through a lot of pain and hardship in their journey, and it becomes less about them going farther or higher and more about giving back. And so we try to enable that through a lot of different means, one of which is interviewing them and getting them to tell their story, right? So to tell and this is actually dovetailing really well with what's happening with DEI right now, with trying to level the playing field around promotions, for instance. If you want to be promoted at Google to become the head of engineering, do you even know what that means? You might have seen a job description as a junior engineer. You might have some idea because you've seen, to the earlier points, a video recording from the head of engineering. But what does it really take to be in that role? So sit down with someone like the head of engineering and interview him or her and go through the process of getting all that information out. Obviously, that's playing and stroking that person's ego, but it's also a way for them to give back to the community in a way that, to our earlier conversation, works in with the realities of their time demands. So it allows people to access what they've experienced, the hard challenges that they've overcome, the zeitgeist and the organizational politics that they've gone through, and people to learn in ways that don't mean that they have to have a formal, let's say, mentoring relationship or sponsorship relationship with that individual. So that works really well as a way to kind of give back and get them thinking more about how to help. And then that usually jumpstarts into a process that Jennifer was talking about, where they're much more open to getting on the speaking circuit or even writing a book or writing an article and connecting for the idea of legacy and giving back.
Yeah, no, great. Okay, last thought, Nabil, and then I'll really move to our last question.
Sure, definitely. I'll make it quick. Is just a little bit maybe from the research and the academic side, and a lot of social networks are essentially built this way. And I've seen some comments kind of come through in the chat around the sort of idea of first and second level connections. What's been happening over the past 6-7 months is we're becoming more stronger with our first level connections, but we're reducing our second level connections. And there's a very famous study by Granovetter, and I'll put this in the comment. It's called The Strength of Weak Ties. And essentially all social networks are built on this, is that let's say you're looking for a job, as you ask the people that you know, your first level connections, but then they'll recommend you to someone who they know, and you're far more likely to get a job or anything else through those second-level connections. In this case, we would call the weak tie. So that's the idea of the strength of the weak ties. And so what can we do more practically in a virtual environment to do that? Think of like things that are more asynchronous, because your live time is limited, your brain processing power is limited every day. Can you join like a Slack channel for an employee resource group like that Michael had said around DEI, where maybe you know somebody who's in it, but you won't learn from them, but you'll be connected to that group who can do that. So there are some ways, if we think about strengthening our weak ties and using our strong ties, our first level connections, as a jumping off point to allow us to explore areas that we have been less exposed to, not only will that broaden our horizons, but it'll give us that ability to grow as well. So thank you. Back to you, Emmy.
I love that. Strengthening the weak ties in our network. We should probably do another webcast on that one. Just networking virtually, right? Like that's a topic I think on top of very many people's minds. Okay, just in the few minutes we have left, the last question. Okay, this is very practical because we know that companies are suffering. We know we're in terrible economic states, right? And many of us may work for smaller companies, big companies where there's no money, no budget, everybody has the same story. How are we supposed to support and coach our leaders with no budget, no money, all of those crazy limitations? What are your recommendations? I'll ask Jennifer and then I'll ask Michael as well. What do you think? What are some ideas? What can you recommend to our audience?
I would say build the capability internal. There are people that are just so thirsty to help and to grow. And so many times what we do is I have a peer-to-peer model that I instituted. And the peer-to-peer model is social learning, where you can actually, people will join communities. They will self-select, and you can actually teach them things. They can teach others things. To Michael's point, it's not just about learning for yourself, but what can you teach others? So tapping into those people in communities and having them in a community that's a shared purpose. So for example, in coaching, people companies struggle sometimes with scale when it comes to coaching. I don't, because I think that many people can learn to coach, and you don't necessarily have to be this master coach to offer a great coaching conversation. So what does it take for the people in your company to learn coaching skills, maybe in this social learning model similar to what we did, and we get people to teach other people. And they do that, and the momentum is it's just so big that this community grows exponentially now. So now you have people with a skill, with the inspiration, they're empowered, and they're right there beside of you. So how do we build capability internal? And there's no cost to that. It's just the cost is people investing their time, but when you put it around a shared purpose, that's what happens. They'll come in and say, oh, I'm interested in that. Similar to social networking. People join certain social networking communities because they're interested in that topic. So we just create a lot of those social communities, and people jump in and they have boundless energy. And so the thing that you have to do is harness it and just let them go. And so that's one of the things that we do for no money. And then we make it open. The way you kill that is if you put too many rules around and too much rigor, but we make it open and we let that group evolve, and they don't do any harm. They actually help, and it costs you nothing, just a little time, but it gives back. They develop and they say, I've learned so much just by being in this experience in 6 months or so.
Perfect. Great suggestion. Michael, what are you seeing or hearing around this?
Yeah, and to Jennifer's point, I think you can have a quote unquote trained coach, an experienced coach who can serve as a mentor or a resource, and you give people enough skill to be dangerous, and I mean that jokingly, but they can jump out there and they can make things happen. And I think it's back to the point of active experimentation. Let's run some experiments and let's do some problem solving. And to one of the themes, let's think again. Let's think about our problems, and I take it a step further. Let's employ things like action learning methodologies, which are relatively straightforward, but take the work that we're doing today, the challenges that we're having today and tomorrow, And we start doing things like after-action reviews, team coaching, self-coaching, the DEI space, bringing in different perspectives of people, using different tools to make sure people are heard, and try it out. Let's try it out for a week. Let's try it out for a month. How'd that go for folks? Oh, our results are better. Oh, we need to tweak this. So I think changing our mindset around it and giving ourselves permission to experiment and give ourselves feedback, I think changes the whole game. And you can get a whole lot done. And it's not a lot more time, and it's typically not a lot more money to make that change.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure if we were to spend more time on that topic, we can come up with more ideas and more ways to execute, right? We are only limited by our imagination. You know, try it out. How can we not have more opportunity to figure out what to do and support each other, support our leaders in still an environment that's going to be very difficult and, you know, with either little or no money at all. It cannot be our only limitation, I guess is my conclusionary comment on this one, right? We cannot limit ourselves to not doing something simply because we'll say we have no money. And we're seeing so much experimentation, to Michael's point, in so many different organizations. And I'm sure we would challenge all of you to just go out and experiment and keep trying and keep figuring it out, right? And how do we do different things? All right, so if I can, we've got like 3 minutes left. So if I can ask the control room to bring back our conclusionary slides just to end and finish up our webcast, I really want to thank Michael, Jennifer, Nabil, all of you for a terrific conversation. We dug deep into different ways that we can support our leaders, whether it's specific skills, different things around presence, sleeping, storytelling, balancing strategy and tactics. All of these things are important, right? So thank you for bringing that into our forefront and helping us remember that we still need to support our leaders. In fact, they need us more than ever. And what can we do to coach them, to help them, to develop them? And so thank you for that. And those of you in the audience can see on the slide, our next month, again, this is a monthly series, our next month, we're going to talk about the role of boards in human capital metrics and management. Many of you may know the SEC has come out with new rulings, but some are vague, and how we're supposed to make sense of all of this with what we should report on from publicly held companies on human capital and HR metrics. It's coming, and we need to be prepared. So if you don't know anything about this, you really need to chime in and check it out, because it's happening and it's going to impact all that we do in HR, or a lot of what we do in HR. So please join me for that next month. And finally, those of you may know we have different conferences, and upcoming soon is women's leadership as well as performance management. You can use the code for discounts, and please join us. We as always have great speakers, great companies, folks like Michael and Jennifer, not in the conference board, joining us to share what we are learning and seeing within our organizations. So please do join us for these events. And then thank you. Thank you to all of you finally for joining us, taking the time out of your day. I hope you received just even one nugget, right? That's all we hope to learn from each other all the time. Nuggets that we can share, nuggets that we can learn, and experiments that we can go back to our jobs and try out. And of course, we do have an evaluation. We would appreciate if you can let us know your thoughts on that. So please click on the link and complete. It's like a 3-question evaluation, and it'll be really quick, and that'll be helpful to all of us as we continue to think about future programming. Finally, thank you, Michael, Jennifer, Nabil. Thank you very much. I'm Amy Abel from the conference board. I hope all of you have a great day.